All right, first of all, I'd like to thank all of you coming out to my town hall tonight. This is such a rainy day, and for you guys to brave the traffic is a very, very great thing. Today I want to talk a little bit about tax reform, but first I'm going to talk about myself a bit and give you guys an introduction if you don't know who I am. My name is Jeff Dove. I'm currently the Republican nominee for Congress in Virginia's 11th Congressional District. My background, I was born in Silver Spring, Maryland, so I pretty much lived in this area my entire life. I was married to my wife, Stephanie, in 2011. We moved to Woodbridge in 2010, actually, and we just had our first child, Serenity, in June last year. She's about 11 months, and I still haven't slept much. I'm still working off of pretty much no sleep. My background with regards to work is I served in the U.S. Army from 2004 to 2007, doing one tour in Iraq. While I was there, I went on 230 plus combat patrol missions and was awarded the Combat Action Badge for engaging in enemy combat. After the military, I got into IT and I worked in database administration for the past 8+ years. So my focus with regards to IT is, and running for this office, is to try and bring this new, innovative perspective to solve old problems. So this has been an interesting year. Like I said, I'm now the nominee for this seat, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about tax reform today. There's a lot of misconceptions about this tax reform legislation. There's a lot of, I guess, negative press being pushed about it. Quite a bit of it is saying it as a scam and it's just money for the most wealthy people in the country, and that is not the case at all. To combat that, I would say that this is just a little background on this legislation. This is the largest piece of legislation related to tax reform since 1986, when President Reagan was in office. Now, I was only 5 at the time, so I didn't really know what was going on. But I understand now that it was one of the biggest pieces of legislation to try and move our businesses forward and to try and move our economy into a better place. Now, what's interesting about this day and age, we are currently in unprecedented territory right now. If you look at our economy, if you look at the stock market, it's where we've never seen it before. You look at unemployment numbers, they are where we've never seen them before. We have more jobs available than have been available ever. There are currently 6.6 million jobs available. Now we have a problem with having enough trained people for those jobs, which is a great problem to have in the sense that we are now to a point where more people can be employed, gainfully employed. Last year, I'll say on December 19th, I received one of the greatest honors that I've gotten since doing this. And I received a phone call from the White House, and it was to come to the tax reform press conference. And I said, of course I'll go to the White House for this. This is a momentous occasion. We need to be celebrating this fact that people are going to get a better leg up, in a sense, because of what we're doing with tax cuts. What's interesting about the tax reform is that companies started, as soon as this legislation was passed, started handing out benefits that I don't think any of us foresaw. Right? The administration certainly didn't see any of this stuff coming. One of the things that companies started doing immediately was they started handing out bonuses to their employees. Then you started seeing the companies raising their minimum wages. What's interesting about that is the Democrats have tried to get companies to raise their minimum wages through legislation by forcing these companies to increase their wages. All it took was tax cuts. Then you have companies going out because of competition, changing their wages for those workers that we now have this surplus of jobs. So you see the wages starting to go up. What's interesting about in this particular district is that there are quite a few businesses in this district that have either given out bonuses or they raised their wages over the past few months. So you have, I'll just run through a list of a few companies in the district: AT&T, Chipotle, Comcast, CVS, Home Depot, JP Morgan, Lowe's, Starbucks, US Bank, Verizon, Walmart, which is one of the largest employers in the district and in the country, Target, BB&T, Wells Fargo. These minimum wage increases and bonuses have done a lot for the community, and it upsets me when I hear people talking about these bonuses and wage increases as crumbs. To a lot of families, these things aren't crumbs. These are being able to pay for a kid's after-school program, or putting money towards college, and things of that nature that they didn't have prior to this legislation being passed. And these companies started giving that out. One thing else, because I would like to open the floor to questions. One thing I'll talk about is something that Jack Kemp actually talked about, which is economic opportunity zones. That's something that was in this legislation that's being pushed by the president right now through his Urban Revitalization Coalition, which is based around the idea of taking capital gains money from companies and reinvesting it into poor, impoverished neighborhoods. And that's something that will lead to growth in these neighborhoods that have poverty rates of 20+%. Real quick, there was already some places that have been approved as of February for these programs. So you have places in American Samoa, Arizona, California, Colorado, Georgia, Idaho, Kentucky, Michigan, Mississippi, and the list goes on. There's at least 10 to 15 states and territories that have already taken advantage of these economic opportunity zones. They're already starting to get that money to invest into these communities. Now, this is something that's been talked about a lot, but now we're actually doing it. And it's going to take some time for us to see what these benefits are in these minority communities or these impoverished communities around the nation once they get passed as being able to receive this money, and once we actually see what the businesses are actually doing once they get in there. Sorry, 1 second. Let's talk about the individual rates. The individual rate cuts are something that don't just help individuals, but they also help sometimes their businesses based on whatever state they're in, if they're taxed at the individual rate as they are at the business rate, right? So that's actually affecting people's bottom lines, not just in their household, but also their businesses as well. The fact that the rate has been dropped is great. I personally, I would love to see it at some point be lower than this, because one of the biggest problems with the way we use taxpayer money is we increase taxes and increase spending without necessarily putting any of the, checks on that spending in the budget, right? So what you have is you have all these agencies basically coming to the federal government every year saying, yeah, we need 10% more money than we had last year. Why? Why do you need that 10% more money? You need to explain what programs you're using that are successful, which ones are not successful, so we can start reallocating funds or removing those programs. So you're not necessarily getting that money. And that's something that I'll be pushing for if I'm elected, to make sure that there's way more transparency as it relates to the money and how it's being spent by each agency. I'm not saying that the CIA needs to tell us every single top secret thing that they're working on, but organization like the Department of Transportation, you can tell me pretty much the majority of the things that you're working on with regards to projects. And we should be able to see which ones are successful and which ones aren't. And the people should be able to just easily go to a website and look at these metrics to see if their money is being used as it should be properly used. I think once you deal with that, then you can start to address the issues of deficit. Once you realize how each agency is actually spending their money and what you can do to change that. The biggest thing with regards to the deficit is always going to be entitlements. That's a whole different discussion. But just around the agencies and how they use taxpayer money is something big that we need to deal with. The family exemption is something that's huge. Now, being able to deduct that amount, which is now being able to deduct the amount that you can now, which has been doubled what it was previously, is helping out quite a few families that are now struggling, that were struggling before, that hopefully with this new increase in the benefit, next year, when they see it, will start to help these families out. When people talk about the negatives of this tax legislation, one of the things they talk about here quite a bit is the state and local tax deductions. Now, it has been capped at $10,000, and in this state, in this area, you will see people, not necessarily benefiting with regards to that. Now, what I'll say to that is, this legislation wasn't perfect, and it wasn't going to be necessarily perfect for every single person out there. If you look at it, 90% of the people out there will see some sort of tax cut, with a small fraction of the people actually seeing an increase. And that's something that I would hope we'll be able to address in the future. And some of these localities that are controlled by the Democratic Party, what they're doing is, in a sense, trying to recoup the money that was given to the federal, or is not being given to the federal government by their new policies. And so you have these deductions or these taxes that are really high in some of the states like Virginia, California, et cetera, that if they were to lower their taxes, it wouldn't be as much of a problem as it is now, based on what the federal government is doing. The 529 program has also changed. What's interesting about that is they made it available for, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the 529 program. It's a college saving program for you to be able to put money in for your kids. Not just college, actually, it's just a tuition savings program. I actually went to a seminar on that recently, and that was very informative because, like I said, we have an 11-month-old. And now you're able to take that money and not just use it for college, but also public schools, they call it, private schools, religious-based schools as well, from K through 12. And that's been kind of a game changer for a lot of people, being able to take that money and get their kid in a private school or whatever school that they see fit for their child. And I think that's something that has been lost in a sense, because there's a lot of noise, or like I said, around this legislation that doesn't necessarily focus on all the pros. It's mainly about the cons when you look at it on TV. The last thing I'll talk about before I open the floor to questions is making the cuts permanent. Now, it's interesting, when this legislation first came out, Democrats all voted against it. Not one voted for it. Their initial argument was that these cuts aren't permanent. Now, the offer has been put out there to make these cuts permanent, and they've come back saying they're going to raise taxes if they get control of the House and the Senate. If they get control of that, they're going to raise taxes on all of us. And that's something that we basically lose all the gains that we've made over the past year now. And that's something that to me is somewhat unacceptable. You're basically taking back what you gave to people because you're trying to prove a political point, in a sense. For years, the Democrats raised the deficit. Years and years. What did the deficit double? Almost to $20 trillion in the last administration. And now, with regards to $1 trillion being added because of this tax cut, oh my gosh, everything's going to hell in a handbasket, and this is the apocalypse. And so it's been interesting that the CBO just put out that they had one of their largest revenue gaining months in history after this tax cut legislation. And that's something that's not talked about either. And so that's something that I want to get out as well. I think that we need to focus on the tangible results and not the media storm or the words that are being thrown around, and actually see what's actually coming into your paycheck, what you're seeing when you actually talk to your certified accountant. Now, I'm definitely not an accountant. I pay somebody to do it for me, but they are seeing the benefits as well. It's interesting with regards to this tax cut. For this campaign, I've been going around the state. I haven't just been sitting in this district the entire time. I've been going around the Commonwealth of Virginia and talking to different people all over. And I was just talking to a business owner in Richmond who was telling me about a company that they own where they basically sell the boards related to air conditioning units and different household appliances. And he said before the tax cut legislation, they were basically getting about $100 per board, somewhere in that realm. They weren't able to hire anybody. They were trying to figure out how they were going to stay relevant. And after the tax cut legislation came into place, they were able to hire employees. Their orders tripled. Not doubled, they tripled. And they were able to start getting in basically $300 for each of those boards now. So now their profits have expanded as well, and they were able to share it in their community. But that's something that's not being talked about enough. I don't think we get as many of the stories from the small businesses, which make up in the Commonwealth of Virginia 95% of the businesses or so. We don't get enough of those stories. All we hear about is, this CEO is going to make X amount of money. Well, if you look at what's going on with the tax climate in Seattle, Amazon's threatening to move based on what they did with the taxes in Seattle. And hopefully they come to District 11 because they were talking about using Northern Virginia as another hub. That would be great. And it's interesting, all these things with regards to the tax cuts, you have all these businesses responding the way we would hope that they would have responded, and they actually did it, and they're doing it, and we're getting these tangible results. Companies are repatriating money left and right. The biggest was Apple bringing $300 billion back into the country to pour it into their infrastructure and hire 20,000 more employees. What is that crumbs? So that's that's where I think the message is being lost quite a bit on this tax cuts. We don't focus on the tangible results, and we focus on the noise too often. And now I'll go to questions. Yes, ma'am.
I want to know if SAIC has given any of their employees a bonus, because if you can find that out, that's where Mr. Conklin made all this money.
Let's see if SAIC.
SAIC.
Okay, I will look that up. What's interesting is he voted against the tax cuts and immediately went to Capital One's headquarters for a tour, because they're building a new building. I actually worked for Capital One for a little while, and actually 3 years. And they raised their minimum wage. They gave quite a few employees bonuses, and then they're setting aside this money for charity, which a lot of businesses are now doing because they have to. Why not? There's a lot of opportunities for charitable giving, and a lot of them are taking that opportunity. And I've actually been talking to different organizations about how they can actually approach these companies for that money, because now they're setting aside, let's say, I don't know how off the top of my head how much Capital One actually set aside, but let's say they set aside $50 million. Okay, if you're an organization that lives or functions in their area, you should reach out to them and see if they're willing to give your organization some money. That should be something that should be happening, whether it's these trade schools or anything of that nature. Whether, like with regards to Capital One, one of the biggest things that they're focused on is coding. If you're a STEM-related organization, why aren't you reaching out to these big companies now that they have this money to be giving, charity right now? So that's something that I would like to address as well once I'm in office, because there's a lot of organizations, like I said, that I've already met with that didn't think about going to these places, and you kind of function as a liaison in a sense between all these different organizations that are around in your district. When you become the elected official, that's something that you can actually help facilitate and help improve your area. Yes, ma'am.
Has Jerry Connolly committed to raising taxes then, if he's elected, on citizens in Virginia?
I have not seen it.
But Pelosi is committed to that.
He is in line with Pelosi on pretty much every vote. So I would not be surprised if that is what he is planning to do.
Maybe you should ask him that question when you have your debate.
if we do have a debate, then that would probably come up. I would assume that would be something that would come up. Yes. Yes.
In terms of Jerry Conley, do you know, when you say he's in line with Pelosi, how many times he has voted in line with her versus off, against, or not in line with her?
I don't have an exact percentage, but if you, sorry. I don't have an exact percentage, but what I'll say is that you can basically go and look at any roll call vote, and if you see her name, you will see his name. That's pretty much where he is. He doesn't generally stray from the caucus too much. You can look at some of the, well, I'll find it, but you can look at some of the websites that have voter scores for each politician and see where they stand on a lot of issues.
I have another question.
Yes.
In what ways do you think you were different from the Republican established position on the tax codes and the way that you go?
I would hope that they would go lower, actually. Like, that's my stance on it. This is a nice starting point, but I think you could have actually more growth if you went lower than it is now. I think that, me personally, like I said, you have to look at things a different way with regards to all these different agencies and how the government spends money, which is something that we don't do now. And I feel we need to put the focus back on transparency and getting these government agencies to actually show us what they're doing and be held accountable for what they're doing. And I think that's where I differ from a lot of politicians. I haven't seen anybody proposing actually getting metrics from each agency for each project to prove its worth. I haven't heard that once since I've been out doing this for the past 2 years. Yes.
The state of Oregon has a benchmark system for all of their programs. I mean, they've been doing it for 25, 30 years. They have long-term measures. But without measuring the outcomes and outputs, we only measure inputs, like how much money you put into this program or that program. Without determining what benefit we're getting from the spending, it's very difficult to do anything other than either hold the line or increase the spending. So I would advocate coming up with a benchmark proposal that could at least have key indicators for the major sources of spending.
One thing I'll say, I like what Director Mulvaney is doing with regards to the budget that they proposed was they started eliminating duplicate programs across agencies. Now, I've worked in the federal government, and I know other people who have worked in the federal government are aware of programs that are duplicates, right? They have similar names, but for some reason they exist, and these things shouldn't. We should be either removing that program or allocating those funds to another more successful program, in a sense. I think that's something that needs to be addressed across the board. It's a good start where they started out, but I think that's something that needs to be addressed everywhere. Yes.
This one has nothing to do with tax reform, but I don't think you can answer.
That's fine.
It has to do with what Sheriff Kincaid announced that she was going to do, which was basically not cooperate with ICE. And I just wanted to know if, what you think about that, like, unless they have a criminal order of detention, they're gonna start doing how they're cooperating with ICE right now, which in essence will release criminals, not just people who are here illegally, but criminals. Unless there's an order of detention from ICE, there's no more cooperation. There's not going to be cooperation with them at all. And here in Northern Virginia, unfortunately, there are some areas that have a heavy MS-13 gang problem. And I want to know what you think about that, because those are the kind of people that are going to be released on the streets.
So as an elected official, I believe your first responsibility, primary responsibility, is the physical and digital security of all Americans, right? With regards to the physical security piece of it, that is directly tied to this ICE detainer process that is going to be ignored ultimately by the sheriff. Now, I believe that that's something that should not be done. We should be following the rules of law that's basically out there. For us to be for our law enforcement to be allowing criminals back onto the street is something that I completely disagree with, wholeheartedly. And I think we need to, the only way to address it really is to, vocalize it to them constantly. Let them know. Something that I think is forgotten is that as an elected official, you're a boss. Each one of you. That's everyone's boss. And so the more people that get together and actually voice their disapproval for something, typically will help sway that person who's in the elected position to realize that they're doing something to the detriment of the community, to make a change to that stance that they may have. So one thing that I will say about myself is I will never have a closed door policy. I will always listen to differing opinions and people from who have different perspectives as me. I've been doing it since I've been out on the trip. I've been going to places that people have been telling me, why in the world would you go to that place? That place, you'll never find any people that support you. Doesn't matter. Ultimately, if I get elected, I'd be representing them. So I have to be able to have those, conversations, and the line of communication needs to be open. I've been to places like, as an example, I went to the gay pride, was Nova Pride last year? Went to Nova Pride, and it was an interesting experience. There were people who, there was Democrat tent after Democrat tent. I was the only Republican there, politician that was there at the time. So that was an opportunity for me to show people that I'm not discriminating against anybody. I am focused on trying to make our community better. That is what my job might make our community and the United States of America better. That is what I'm focused on. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
What's the largest employer in the 11th district?
Fairfax County government.
Why didn't I know that?
That was an hospital.
Sorry,
I thought it was another hospital.
no, the government has more employees. The government was number one. I think, I'm trying to think what number two is. There's a lot of government contract related companies on that list. Then you get down to like 15 or so, like Walmart. So Walmart is one of the largest employers in the world.
Private.
Yes.
Well, I was going to ask, did the largest employer in the county give people a bonus? But that's just kind of turns into a joke.
I think they raise taxes.
Yes.
I think they do.
And they're contributing to people, they're a contributing factor to those people who earn millions that are going to be curtailed in what they can deduct for their federal tax.
Well, yes.
So they'll all move to Florida.
I don't know about that. I don't know about everybody moving to Florida, but maybe they'll move to Prince William, where I live. Who knows? Any other questions? You guys, any questions?
I would like them to, I think now, what an agency gets the coming year is dependent on how much they spend, or if they spend all of their money. The only way to get more money the next year is to spend everything you've got now. And that's just insane.
So that's why you have that mad rush.
Yeah,
in the
everybody
fiscal year.
gets together.
We need to buy these desks now, and all this furniture and computers. Yes, let's do it now, so we can get more money for next year.
That's why the cost goes up.
Yes, that should not be the case. Yes, ma'am.
In Fairfax, we have a unique problem because our Board of Supervisors keeps raising our taxes, our property taxes, and we also pay an additional subsidy for the metro. And we're going to have Medicaid expansion possibly go through our legislature at the state level, which the feds are covering now, but if they stop covering it, that's going to be a $28.8 billion commitment at the state level over 10 years. And we may, if the Democrats take the House, and even the
Which
Senate,
house?
the congressional house, we could see our federal taxes go up significantly. At what point do we have a tipping point where we just can't afford this anymore? Young families are leaving Fairfax County already because we have a huge burden at a county level, but they're still going to get hit by state and federal taxes if the Democrats go back in.
I think, to touch on your point of the tipping point, what was interesting was last year during the governor's campaign, there was a lot of talk about how many people leave Virginia versus come in. And Virginia was having net losses all the time. And you're going to start seeing that in these counties or the localities that the taxes are getting higher because people can't sustain themselves. Even though you may make, a considerably high salary in some places, here it can seem like you're living paycheck to paycheck if you're in an area that has really high taxes. So I think one of the things that the local government needs to get a handle on is how they're actually spending the money. There should never be, I actually went to a school board debate last year, and a student said, hey, what are you guys going to do about us having supplies in class? And I thought to myself, this is one of the richest counties in the United States. How are the kids not having supplies in their classroom? So there's a lot of things that may need to be addressed through audits or management audit or whatever it may be. And I think that's a starting point to try and address the fact that taxes keep needing to be raised. They wouldn't need to be raised if you got a handle on how you're actually spending your money.
There's never been an audit.
Oh, there's never been an audit?
Never been an audit of the school money they get.
Is that just the school?
52%.
Is that just the school, or is that just the school or the county as
They
well?
don't have an independent auditor. There's no, they.
And see, that's something that I guess the people would have to stand up and try to fight for, getting these things. Because I saw the candidates last year trying to fight for this stuff, but that didn't get them over the finish line in order to get into the elected position. But I think that's something that shouldn't necessarily be dropped by the people if you want it to get done. Yes, sir.
Yeah, not tax related, but I'd like to know, as an elected congressman, which committees would you be interested in working? Like, what would you say is your policy field of expertise?
So the first one would be Veterans Affairs. Having the experience that I do with the VA, I would love to see change in that space. We have too many problems with regard. There's a culture in Veterans Affairs of the person coming to seek care is the problem, and that happens quite a bit. And that's something that I would like to address. Also, I would like to be on science and technology, of course, because my IT background. I would like to be in that space to try and especially push forward my proposal with regards to how revamping how Social Security is leveraged. And transportation would be another space, because transportation is one of the biggest issues here, actually. It's one of the top 3. And so I'd like to be on that committee because we cut things like Metro. We talked about Metro money being, we see all these problems with Metro and we just keep throwing money at it with no real solution in sight. You have these stories that come out about things like the concrete is having an issue. Is that on the red line? I can't remember what line that is. But you have issues with the concrete being messed up that was being used for these tunnels, etc. These things shouldn't be happening as much money from all these localities that's being pushed into Metro. So that's something that needs to be addressed as well. Yes, sir.
Because a potential congressman, right now it's fairly obvious that institution is not working very well, and one of the reasons is it so factionalized. The Democrats vote unison against anything the Republicans propose. The Republican caucus is split. What do you see as the way to get Congress to operate the way they should, or to be productive in addressing real problems instead of on the background list?
So I think one thing that gets lost is you do see pieces of legislation that'll get through, and they'll have pretty much unanimous support. It'll be something like related to veterans, as an example. That'll be something that people can unify around. I think there are issues that we can find common ground to start moving forward. There are some things that both sides kind of go off the rails on to the extreme when they put their legislation out without thinking about the compromise that's needed in order to get things done. So, like one of my biggest proposals that makes me different than all these other politicians goes back to my Social Security proposal. That's a bipartisan proposal because it's related. It affects all of us. All of us have had problems with identity theft, whether it was credit cards or dealing with your Social Security number. So yeah, it's been I think finding issues like that are the key to get us to start working together more to actually do what you're elected to do, and that is make life for all Americans better. Yes.
What efforts or activities, are you doing to try and reach out particularly to the African American community when most of the African American community votes Democrat?
Well, the biggest thing I'm doing is knocking on people's doors and talking to them in person. I've been actually targeting, so the majority of the African American community in my district is in Prince William. So I've been targeting precincts in Prince William County to, reach out and talk to them. I've already had invitations to speak in different candidate forums at, African American churches and things of that nature. So there are opportunities for me to do that.
What is the reception you get?
So it's interesting. I don't really get a negative reception. I think a lot of it is around the messenger, quite a bit, with regards to if people are willing to listen to you or not. I think once you get past the initial, the ice wall, in a sense, then people are willing to warm up to you and actually listen to what you have to say. Like I was telling this young man earlier, when I was on the steps of the Centerville Library, it was interesting, an impromptu town hall broke out. And there were Democrats, Republicans, and Independents. And we all started talking. There was common threads through all of us. 10 years is a long time to be in Congress. There was the common thread of, they don't do much. We need change. We need people who are actually going to do something for us. Regardless of what their ideology was, that was the biggest thing, is they want people who are actually doing something for the community. They want people out in the community doing something. They want people actually not showing up once a year just for a photo op to try to get some votes. And that's what my opponent's doing right now. And I know he's probably watching this. So yeah, we see what he's. The two areas that my opponent is most terrified that I will pull voters from is from the African American community and the veteran community. And where does he spend his Sundays? Hanging out at African American churches to try and convince them that me showing up once in a blue moon is me actually supporting their community. So with regards to the African American community, I'm also learning and reaching out to Pastor Scott, who is working on the President's Urban Revitalization Coalition, and that what we talked about with regards to the economic opportunity zones. And that's an opportunity to be able to reach out to various communities as well. With regards to minority outreach, we've already talked to different groups about getting people on the ground to help me reach out to various communities as well. So this district is minority majority, and being able to talk to each community about their problems is key to be able to help them solve their problems. So that's how I plan for the next 6 months. Trying to get this out. I don't have the counter down in my head like most politicians.
Well, what do you see the biggest problem with the 11th?
The biggest problem in the 11th district?
Jerry Conlon.
So the biggest problem, I'd say number one issue that people talk about is transportation. And we have to do something to address the amount of people on the roads and the condition of the roads, and that's not something that's going to be done in one term of a congressperson. That's something that's going to take a long time. There are issues, I'd say the second biggest issue that I get when I go to knock on people's doors, regardless of what the community is immigration. And that illegal immigration kind of permeates through all communities, because some communities are affected disproportionately, and they understand that. And like, as an example, the African American community suffers quite a bit because of illegal immigration. And so you have this community that is somewhat stuck in this democratic mindset, but not sold on some of these ideals, like just giving amnesty to people who came here illegally, as an example. So I think there are issues. I would say that probably the thing that I could probably try to get done that's a big problem in this area will be around immigration. That would probably be the thing that have the fastest end. Transportation is going to take a while. And that's going to be based on a huge infrastructure bill at some point as well. Yes?
Just a quick question. So you have a lot of precincts in Herndon.
Yes.
And over the years, there's been a lot of discord between various groups about the immigration and the work issues. Have you worked with any of those groups there yet?
Not in Herndon, no. I'll follow up.
There might be somebody I could connect with.
I will follow up with you.
Yeah.
Yes. Does anyone have any more questions? Wow.
Well, we're happy, I'm happy to speak, I'm happy to know.
Thank you so much. Oh, awesome. My daughter's happy I'm running too. She likes playing with the phone cards. All right, I'd like to thank you guys for coming out. This was very informative for me. You guys asked pretty good questions. I look forward to doing my next one. I should probably, what would be a good topic? Let's just throw that out there.
Immigration.
All right, we'll do a town hall on immigration. This is May. We'll do one next month after the primary. Yep, Woodbridge, immigration. Thank you guys.
Thank you.